Talking about Star Wars. Can you read this one?
Love it. All right.
Well,
Introducing ourselves here. Get to it, Joe.
welcome everybody to Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. You can call us Fond for short. Brand new podcast, so forgive us any uh, any troubles we may run into here, but ready to get started.
Any sins we may commit.
Yes, my name is Joe, and on the other end is Mr. Cody J. Fleming.
Hello, everyone.
I'm sorry that I used your last name. My last name is Janka. I don't care if anyone knows that. So, what are we talking about today, Cody Kittens?
It's our first episode, so this is going to be where we argue about the Book of Boba Fett from
I
Star
guess.
Wars.
See, this is fun because I don't feel like I really fully know your feelings about the Book of Boba Fett. I feel like I have made mine known in our group of friends, but I'll be curious to see to find out how you felt about various things and the series as a whole. One idea I put forth is I thought it would be good to start by talking about our respective experiences with the Star Wars franchise as a whole. Um, what sort of background do you have? How much of a fan are you? I'll let you go first on that.
All right, sounds good. Well, I have a long history with Star Wars, although my beginning of it is probably not as strong as other people's would be. I was a fan of 4, 5, and 6 when they were already out. But I wasn't overly a fan. Like they were just like this pop culture phenomenon, and then well respected, like a lot of older movies are, classics, if you will. But I really hooked on probably more, and people will probably downplay me on saying this, but Episode 1 is probably what hooked me into the Star Wars
Oh no,
universe
I was going to
first.
jokingly say that. I didn't think that was actually where this was going.
Yeah, it came out. Well, it came out like what, when I was a freshman in college, must have been right about that time. Ish period was about 99, 2000, right in there somewhere, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I went to it twice in the movie theater, and that and Austin Powers 2 remain the only two movies I've seen twice in the movie theater to this day. I'm
Wow.
sure you have me beat on many, many
That
other
is
ones too.
mind blowing.
That I can think of at least. I can't think of another one I went to. But anyway, Episode 1 came out. I bought some merch for that, and it was all over the place. And then 2 was pretty good, and 3 was meh. And then the later trilogy, I mean, started okay. 7 was fine. 8 was we
Amazing.
probably could devote a whole episode to 8. I'm sure at some point here along the way how terrible it was, but that's besides the point. And then
I mean, if we want to get some arguments in, we could definitely do that.
definitely could. I know another host we got to bring in for that one if we're gonna do it.
Oh boy.
And then 9 was fine. It just wrapped it up, whatever, and had its own issues. So that's kind of my movie tie in there. But I will say, probably unlike most people that are Star Wars fans, my bigger connection is actually probably to that. Actually, uh,
What?
yeah. So I've collected Star Wars toys various times. I had the whole Episode 1, no, not Episode 1, Episode 3, and partially 2. The whole toy line I had for quite a while. Sold them off now, but one thing I have kept through the years is I have like a bin or two still of Boba Fett toys in the basement, just Boba Fett toys.
Must be nice to
So
still have some Star Wars toys.
yeah, I don't have many more toys left, but I still have those. So I've always been fascinated with him as a character. I don't know why, but I'm going to kind of talk about
Well,
that a
yeah,
little
let's get into
bit.
that a little bit later because I kind of wanted to talk about that as well.
Yeah. So I like the Disney Plus stuff up to Boba Fett. I'll leave you in suspense right there.
Ooh,
So,
interesting. Well,
what's your hit?
there's a question I want to ask. Let me go through my history a little bit, and then I have a question as far as I have a blind spot with Star Wars that I think you might also share.
Okay.
Um, I started. I thought I started a little late, but I started much earlier than you. I've always been a nerd, and when I was a kid, I was really into Star Trek, specifically The Next Generation. And when I was in grade school, maybe like sixth or seventh grade, I had a friend whose name was Willie Nelson, not the Willie Nelson, and he introduced me to Star Wars. He was like obsessed with it and convinced me that I was like the coolest thing ever. I needed to get into it. So I watched the movies and fell in love and started collecting some stuff. In my parents' house, I still have a complete set of original Empire Strikes Back trading cards.
Very
There
nice.
was I'm not that old for the record. This was in the 90s, but there was a local shop not like a block away from our grade school that for some reason still had like full boxes, full cases of wrapped Empire Strikes Back trading cards.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, after I got into it, me and my friend would go there and just buy them up, and we were both trying to put together a set. So I have the full collection. Anyway,
That's fun. That's fun.
so love Star Wars. Didn't hate the prequels as much as most people did. Even back in the day, I thought I was so into it that I was happy just to see people swinging lightsabers and using the Force and shit. Like, it still kind of did it for me. I mean, I wouldn't say that they were great movies, but
Yeah, right. But it like
um,
brought the phenomenon back.
yeah, exactly. It was. I mean, up to that point, right around the turn of the century, whichever year I think it might have been 99 when episode 1 came out. But I mean, I was 16 and, had been a fan for several years at that point, and like nobody ever thought there was ever going to be any more Star Wars. And then all of a sudden, hey, there's more Star Wars, which is another thing we can probably talk about in a little bit here. Um, but yeah, I mean, I even went to see one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life in the theater, specifically because there was supposed to be a trailer for episode 1 before it.
Ah,
That movie was Wing Commander, which is based on a video game series that I loved, but the movie was terrible. And it turned out that there was not a trailer for Star Wars attached to the print that I saw, so it was double loss.
they duped you.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, prequels came out, were okay. Once again, no one thought we would ever get any more Star Wars. George Lucas just didn't seem like he was going to do anything else with it. All of a sudden, many years later, again, we get the sequel trilogy. I loved The Force Awakens when it came out. I actually saw that 3 times in the theater. Pretty
Ah,
sure that is the last movie that I saw multiple times. I'm trying to mute my microphone for a second here. Excuse me. I loved The Last Jedi, unlike my co-host Cody, which that might actually be a good topic for a future episode.
it probably would be.
I would go so far as to say that I think that might be the best Star Wars movie.
Of
And
all?
of all, certainly since Empire Strikes Back, possibly out of all of them. And I like literally cannot comprehend why it gets as much hate as it does. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Rise of Skywalker, again, I didn't hate as much as a lot of people seem to. I did have some pretty major issues with it. I There's really like 1 or 2 major things I wish would have been different, but it was okay for the most part. I mean, again, I'm pretty easy to please when it comes to Star Wars. Give me lightsabers and Force stuff.
Mhm.
The I will say that I also really enjoyed the Disney Plus Star Wars stuff up to this season of television,
Okay.
which we will get to shortly. The question I wanted to ask you is: have you watched any of the animated series, the Clone Wars or Rebels?
Those or any of that. I actually have not watched any of that stuff.
I have not either, and I feel like that might put us at a little bit of a disadvantage here, just because, from my understanding, a lot of what is now going on in the Disney Plus shows is repurposing a lot of things that
Yeah.
happened in the animated series and or bringing in characters that originated in those shows. So I mean, let's just establish for anyone who might be listening, we are not familiar with the animated series. through listening to other podcasts and doing some reading, I'm vaguely aware of some of the things from those shows that are kind of being brought into the Disney Plus live action series, but I have not actually watched any of them.
No, I'd agree, and I would say watching this season in particular, compared to even the Mandalorian seasons, there were characters that like they popped up on the screen and I knew who they were, even though I have no like original frame of reference for who they were. But again, that's for my world mostly again because of toys. Like I just keep up on the toy world
Yeah.
so much.
I mean, I knew some of the big ones because of, reading about things and listening to things, but I mean, you do, even if you're not familiar, when certain characters pop up, I think you get the sense that like this is someone that I should know or that other people would know who this is.
Yeah, good
Like
point.
they kind of make it, obvious that this is like a big reveal popping up. I mean, even like in I mean, I feel like I could talk about the Mandalorian, at least the past season, since we're focusing on Book of Boba Fett, but like Ahsoka turning up in the Mandalorian, like
Right.
that was set up as this big reveal. You see the lightsabers, and so I feel like even if you didn't know who that was, you know that it's someone important. And I mean, I guess I give the showrunners credit for that. Where it's not, even if you're not that familiar, you get the sense that this is someone you should pay attention to. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point.
No, no, you're right.
Do you want to get into some Book of Boba Fett? You can't see right now because my video is terrible, but I'm actually wearing a Boba Fett t-shirt right now. Well, actually, you know what? Let's do this. You had talked briefly about the fact that you have a connection with the Boba Fett character. Oh man, Cody is also wearing a Boba Fett t-shirt. That's
You bet I
amazing.
am. You bet I am. I have a couple.
So prior to this series, what were your feelings about Boba Fett? What were your I mean, it's tricky because if we're just going based on the movies, obviously we have not seen much of Boba Fett at all. If you want to go
Right.
back to his original appearance at the holiday special, which I don't know if we want to,
I don't know if we need to bring that up.
he's kind of but he's established as kind of the baddest bounty hunter in the galaxy. In Empire, he's introduced, and he's a bad guy because even Darth Vader has to tell him no disintegrations
There you go.
because he's apparently known for just cooking fools.
Yeah.
So I mean, what is your connection and what drew you to the character?
Yeah, so this is, I was trying to think of this earlier today actually, and I can't think of another example in a movie or TV lore, legend, if you will, of a character who has like accomplished so much and been so famous despite having done so very little for their respective franchises. Like it's weird, right?
Yeah,
And now he's here with his own TV show named after him on Disney Plus. So honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with his appearance, which is, kind of mysterious. Like, he's got the mask over his face. You can't really see who he is or what he looks like. If he's presumably he's, humanoid compared to some of the other insectoids or robots or whatever else they have in the bounty hunter crew there as they were. I think a lot of it has to do with his appearance, and then of course, bringing in Han Solo is a pretty big deal,
it's
carbonite and all
true.
that good
That is
things.
true.
Um, and again, being toy collector that I am, this is somebody who they have somehow, like I'm saying here, they have figured out a way to make this character so popular in like the public consciousness, despite the fact that they have so little to go off of. And I know he's expanded on in like the comics, the extended universe, and things like that, like the original story of the Sarlacc pit and how he got out of that and everything, which we'll talk about here in a bit. But um, just a really an odd choice, I guess, to have his own TV show.
Yeah, I mean, so
Not,
do you
not,
think do you think a lot of it is just the mystique? I mean, and everyone thinks Boba Fett's cool. Like, everyone has always thought Boba Fett was cool. And I mean, in my experience, I think a lot of it is because,
yeah,
so much mystique. We really didn't know much about him. I mean, we got in the
maybe
prequels,
not,
we see
maybe
him
not
as a,
episode 2 Boba Fett.
yeah, in the prequels, we learn that he's a clone of Jango Fett and, whatever. But I mean, I think, yeah, for the most part, all we've known about him for the past, 30 plus years is that he looks cool and he's an awesome bounty hunter.
Yep.
has an occasionally problematic rocket launcher on his back for you toy collectors. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, and I think that's well. I mean, going off of that, then, like, what were your expectations? Well, so let's back up.
Yep. We're gonna have to go back a bit.
Book of Boba Fett obviously was set up at the end of the last season of The Mandalorian. I think it was during the post-credit scene in the last episode. We see that little Boba Fett comes back in the Mandalorian proper for an episode
Couple
or
of seconds.
two.
Yeah. Yep.
Which that I mean, in the Mandalorian, again, badass, like, kicks some butt, awesome, excited to see him come back. I thought it was cool that they got Tamara Morrison to play him.
Yes.
Uh, and I love that he has a New Zealand accent now. But no, I mean, I think Tamara Morrison is like a great actor. I obviously have not seen him in a lot of things. The only other thing I can think of that he was in was Aquaman. Which, have you seen that?
I have not seen Aquaman.
I didn't love that movie, but he was honestly my favorite part of it.
Okay.
Anyway, but yeah, I think it's cool that they got him to come back, and it was great to see him in The Mandalorian. The last scene in the end credit sequence of The Mandalorian is he and Fennec Shand marching into Jabba's former palace, murdering Bib Fortuna. And then you see Boba Fett sit on the throne, and then you get the teaser, the Book of Boba Fett. Like, damn, that's awesome. I want whatever this is.
Right.
So, what were you expecting then? I mean, based off of what you know about Boba Fett and that whole setup, what were you expecting this series to be?
Well, I mean, honestly, so this is a case of like, it's less more with the character because he's this bounty hunter who kind of goes on these missions by himself, whatever he's good to do. He's not really morally different, perhaps, than the Mandalorian, but kind of a similar singular mission type thing, where you kind of saw in the first two seasons of that. But now he goes from this transition of he's going to be the crime lord, right, which is kind of hinted at there when he sits on the throne, and then he's going to be kind of running Jabba's old empire in some ways, and his role changes then, right? And so I don't know. I guess I had kind of expected he's going to be more so than he was this like ruthless badass who's going to, um, if not instill fear, at least still instill order using his own style here. And I feel like what we got pretty early on. Well, actually, we didn't even get to that early on. We got to like the backstory with the Tusken Raiders for the first like 3 episodes or
Oh
something.
boy, did we!
Boy, did we ever! Which I don't know. You want to talk about that, or you want to talk about the stuff in the city? I guess.
Well, let's. I mean,
You want to go chronological here?
That's a good question. Well, let me just jump. I mean, I had similar expectations. It sounds like to you. Baddest bounty hunter in the galaxy. You see him sitting on Jabba's former throne. You get the sense that he's going to establish himself as, the crime lord, which is a premise that they ostensibly use in this series, Book of Boba Fett, is that he's the new, I think they call it daimyo, which is a Japanese term, but the new crime lord of the city. So I wanted it to be just that, like, dark, gritty, crime show set in the Star Wars universe. I think that sounded awesome.
Yeah,
That's not what we got.
Cool number 2, Fennec Shand. I mean, they look like they were
Yeah,
trying to
Fennec
do.
Shand is a badass. Like,
Yeah,
I
I love
love
Fennec Shand.
yeah, Ming Na is a great actress.
Yep.
Like, yeah, I thought she was super cool in The Mandalorian. I was excited to see them doing crime together, and like you said, maybe establishing some order. There's rabbit holes we can go down, which I don't think we want to go down necessarily, but you had said that maybe the morals between Mandalorian and Boba Fett are not dissimilar. It could be argued that they are, just because Mando is trying to live as a Mandalorian, whereas Boba Fett is not. But
Yeah,
that's a whole can of worms. I don't know if we need to dive into.
yeah, maybe not. I think they've kind of established in the Disney Plus universe that Mandalorian comes in all shapes and sizes, I guess.
I mean, I just don't want to get angry. Our five listeners out there. I don't want anyone to get mad if we don't establish the fact that Boba Fett is not a Mandalorian.
Okay, fair, fair, fair.
He is a he's a clone of a Mandalorian, but he himself is not. He's not a foundling. He's not part of the Mandalorian creed or anything.
Makes sense.
So
Yep,
people like to draw those distinctions. Anyway,
that's fair.
um, I honestly feel like we can kind of lump some things together. I'm just going to come out and say that I did not really get invested in the first four episodes of this series whatsoever.
Yeah, you had some strong opinions, I saw.
I just I thought they spent way too much time in the flashbacks with the Tusken Raiders, which I mean, yeah, it's cool to see how he got out of the Sarlacc pit and he lived with them, and I'm guessing part of what they were trying to convey is that living with them is what maybe changed his moral compass a little bit to make him less of a cold-blooded killer. But I was bored out of my mind.
Yeah, I had read a few things about the early episodes with the Tusken Raiders as far as I read one article and I don't remember what site it was on now, but they had kind of praised the episodes as like portraying the Tusken Raiders as like more than just this one-dimensional side race on all of the
I will
background.
say I did like that aspect of it. I did like, seeing them portrayed as more than just faceless savages out in the waste,
Yeah,
getting the sense that they are actually a people and have their own culture and whatnot.
felt like the Mandalorian, jumping on that for 1 second, kind of did the same with the Jawas a little bit too. Like they were more established, I feel like, in the Star Wars universe, but I felt like when he was kind of interacting with them through the couple episodes too, it kind of made them a little more 3D.
Yeah, that's fair.
But anyway, back to the Tusken Raiders. I kind of agree with what you're saying here in terms of it was too long. Not that much of the series needed to be devoted to him learning to find his chi with the Tusken Raiders out in the middle of the desert or whatnot. It probably could have been at most 2 episodes, and even that may have been stretching it. They kind of messed with time because they kept doing the back and forth
Yeah,
thing. Maybe if they had just done a single linear episode and kind of
that
showed
was
him crawling out and
yeah,
everything.
that was kind of my like I feel like if they had just done one episode is about that, get the story over with, and then take us to present day, on Tatooine, I think that would have worked better for me.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm kind of jumping around here as far as things I wanted to talk about, but one thing I've heard speculated, which I think this is where we see this idea possibly proven. I've heard people speculating that basically this entire season of television was originally plot threads that were intended to be part of The Mandalorian, and that be it Disney or the showrunners, someone kind of looked at it and said, hey, maybe we can cash in on this a little bit and draw these things out and put the Boba Fett name on it to try to get more attention and maybe sell some more things.
interesting.
So, instead of just incorporating it in probably a more compact form into The Mandalorian, they drew it out into these seven, almost hour long episodes of TV, and it ended up being a lot longer than it really needed to be. And I
Yeah,
mean, we'll get to this later, but I mean, I also think if you think of this as the Mandalorian season 2.5, it works a little bit better in the grand scheme of things than if you're actually trying to see it as a Boba Fett TV series.
no, that's probably a pretty good distinction because I know that was a criticism. Is what was that episode 6? I think maybe where they were kind of joking, like, "Are we going to see a cameo by Boba Fett in this episode?"
Well, episode 5, 6, and 7. I mean, 5 is when Mando first shows up. Um, but yeah, like from then on, it's just the Mandalorian with,
Yeah.
occasional guest appearances from Boba Fett. But I mean, let's back up. So let's go back to we talked a little bit about how we felt about the Tusken Raider stuff. How did you feel about the like quote unquote present day, him taking over for Jabba, that whole plot line.
So here's the thing. I think if they're going to make it a 7 episode show, which we're kind of talking about here, if they cut the Tusken Raiders down, they could have added an episode of two of him dealing with like any problem of manageable size as the new crime lord in town, like some small conflict or something. It seemed like he was in charge, and then all of a sudden there was this giant climax they were working towards with the Pike Syndicate right away.
Yeah, I agree. It's like they went straight for like Seven Samurai or the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, I mean, I think that is, I was thinking about this earlier today, and I think that is probably my biggest issue with the series is that it just didn't spend any time establishing like any characters or because I mean I think they laid a pretty good table for themselves as far as like things they could have explored. I kind of half jokingly said before we started recording that I wanted to talk about justice for Garza Fwick, I think is her name. The Twilight character that's played by Jennifer Beals, and I feel like that's just sort of emblematic of the issues I had with the series. But if you think about it, most of, I mean, especially not being versed in like the animated series and things like that,
Mhm.
when I think of Twi'leks, I think about dancing slave girls, you know, and I think a lot of the audience probably has similar associations where like we think of Twi'leks as like slaves or like being sexualized. And in this series, they introduce this character who is like this confident woman who owns her own cantina. You know, she's kind of tried to play all the sides and you know keep herself afloat in this world of crime. I think she's a fascinating character. Like I think she could have been a fascinating character, but the series never really stopped to explore any of that, and it never really stopped to explore much of the setting at all, or like you know any of the new characters that were introduced. So I think that's the problem. Is I almost feel like if we wouldn't have got Mandalorian at all this season and they would have actually slowed down and spent some time in this particular setting with these characters, you know, like you said, maybe not have to rush to introduce like this big bad right away. I think it would have been a better show for it. You know, we go from basically zero to we're at war with the Pike Syndicate in like five
Yeah.
seconds, and it's just too much. Like I think I mean, the problem that it introduces, aside from like not being satisfying at any character level, is so when we get to the finale, you know, Boba Fett and Mando and everyone bands together to try to save the town from the Pikes, but we don't care about the city at all because we don't know any of these people.
Yeah, which they promptly destroyed during the fight also. But
Yeah, well, that too, but so yeah, I mean, as far I guess my biggest issue is that like the Boba Fett portion of the Book of Boba Fett, I felt like was pretty dissatisfying. And I mean, the other thing is, um, you know, I do feel like the Tusken Raider stuff was supposed to be at least part of his character change and, you know, going from being this killer to being like more sympathetic. But I didn't feel like that really worked for me. And so we get, especially coming off of the end of the Mandalorian, you know, we see him come in, kill Bib Fortuna, sit on the throne. That's the same timeline, ostensibly after he had gone through whatever with the Raiders. So he still looks like he's going to be a badass there, but
yeah,
then
that's a
there's
great
just
point.
no real sign of that like cold-blooded badassery like throughout this series.
Yeah,
I
that's a
mean,
great point.
we get references to it later, but it just feels like too much of a character change.
Yeah,
Like
no, you're kind of right. He goes from that ruthless killer to, you know what, I by like episode 2, I think, maybe 3, I watched it with my family, and I had kind of joked to my kids like Boba Fett used to be this cool bounty hunter, and now he's a tax collector.
yeah, they
Like,
managed to make Boba Fett boring, which is not a feat I ever thought they would accomplish.
but
Like
maybe that
he's kind of just like a dad.
the perils of expanding that mystique character a little bit, maybe. I don't know, or maybe they
Well,
just
and it's I mean that's true, you know. It's
you can't. Yeah. can't remain the silent cool guy off to the side if you're talking and doing stuff, I guess. But
At least he got revenge on that damn Sarlacc.
yeah, he did. Poor Sarlacc.
I have to say, that was I I didn't find that particularly satisfying on a narrative level, but I had to be amused by just how ridiculous it was.
Yeah, no,
Like
I
he's
agree
just so mad about being stuck in that Sarlacc pit.
that he had to take revenge.
He just had to go and blow it up.
I love it. I love it. All right,
Um,
I had some other questions here I was gonna throw to
yeah,
you. So first four episodes basically is the Boba Fett show, like we've mentioned here a couple
yep.
times. And then it was suddenly the Disney Parade of All Stars, where they were bringing in every conceivable character they could think of from this universe. They all had to make an appearance at least once, sometimes twice, sometimes three times. Um, and I guess that kind of goes back to an earlier comment you made, which is, are we looking at this as Mandalorian 2.5 or is this Boba Fett season one? Because if you use that lens, then I guess these comments have a bit of a different light to them. But I mean, what was your take on these cameos, or in some cases more than cameos, from all these guest stars? And do you think these were needed entirely, or were some of these needed?
Um, I mean, are you talking about like Mando or the
I
other
mean, I'm
characters
just
that
looking through
show
my
up?
list here. So we brought back Mando, hugely
Yeah,
popular character, he's established.
yeah.
Brought back Grogu, even possibly more popular character, at least in like the kiddie world or whatever.
I
Then
did
you
like that
had
they joked about his name being stupid for the record.
they brought back Timothy Olyphant's Cobb Vanth,
Oh, we
character.
need to talk about him for
We'll talk
sure.
about him. I enjoy him. They brought back Skywalker. They brought back Asuka. They brought back Cad Bane. Well, they didn't bring back, but they brought in
They
Cad Bane.
introduced Cad Bane into live
Introduced
action.
him. Um,
So
and then we can't forget the biggest cameo of all, even probably more so than those five characters, Danny
is it
Trejo.
Machete?
It's Danny Machete Trejo.
Machete.
Machete.
Um, so let me kind of take a step back. So I love The Mandalorian. And part of the reason I love The Mandalorian is that it does something that I have wanted them to do with Star Wars ever since I heard that Disney had bought the rights to Star Wars. And that is that it actually introduces new characters and does some new things in the Star Wars universe. And my one of my biggest problems I've had with a lot of what they have done since taking over Star Wars is an over reliance on old established characters, basically just re like you said, the parade of hits, like
Yeah.
bringing in all the old favorites and things like that. I mean, that's why we didn't really talk about this movie, but I hate Rogue One. And the reason I hate Rogue One has nothing to do with the actual overall plot of that movie. It's the fact that they had to shoehorn in a bunch of references to the original trilogy. There's absolutely no reason there has to be a random shot of R2 and 3PO in that movie. Or they bring back Panda Baba and Dr. What's His Face from the cantina. Like it feels so forced every time they go back to that watering hole, and I just hate it.
I just say it feels like The Force Awakens.
I would say that.
Okay.
So I mean, kind of like working our way back up to Boba Fett, I had a similar, not quite as angry response, but I had concerns when really horrible deep fake Luke Skywalker showed up in the last episode of Mandalorian season 2. And it's not because like I'll be honest, at first when you see the X-wing pull up and then you see the black cloak with the green lightsaber swinging around, I got a little emotional. Like I was excited for a second, but then um then you see the face and you realize that they are just kind of tying things back into the old stuff, and it was like deflating for me. So flash forward to to Boba Fett. I was super excited to see Mando show up. that was the first time I was like into the series. Like the episode 5, when all of a sudden it becomes an episode of The Mandalorian, I thought it was awesome. Like
Oh,
I
right. So that's kind of a condemnation of the series then, right? If you're saying when the Mandalorian showed up to save it, you were like, all right, now I'm invested in this for the first time.
exactly. I've told other people I've talked to that they can skip the first 4 episodes of the season and just watch episodes 5 through 7 because that's
I
like
mean,
I mean, like I said before, I feel like there was potential in the first 4 episodes with, exploring that setting and stuff, but they just didn't do that. So for me, up until episode 5, if I was rating the series, I probably would have given it like a 3 or 4 out of 10. Like I was just bored through most of it. But then all of a sudden, Mando shows up and things get interesting again. And it's partly because we spent 2 seasons with that character and care about him. But it's
mhm.
also because I feel like the showrunners seem more interested in him than they did in Boba Fett. Like it felt like there was like a breath of life breathed into the series at that point.
Yeah, or at least maybe knew how to write that character better because
Yeah, and
they had
that's
just done two
true.
seasons of fairly successful episodes.
That's true. Well, I mean, and I can't fault them entirely. I mean, we talked about the mystique of Boba Fett and how everyone loves Boba Fett. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure, like trying to figure out what to do with that character that has been both so beloved and so completely like under like non-written.
Yeah,
Like all of a sudden you're trying to do something with this character who has just been a mysterious figure for 40 years. Like it's a lot to deal with.
that's a good point.
But but yeah, I mean, to your question about how I felt about all the cameos and stuff, I liked it. I even didn't hate the Luke Skywalker stuff in this season, which surprised me. I think part of it is that he looked a lot better, which I read somewhere that they actually hired someone who was doing deep fake videos on YouTube.
Yeah, I read there was an actor. Yeah,
Um, and I mean, I'm sure that probably helps, but like I liked. I mean, I liked Ahsoka showing up. I liked all of it. I thought the last 3 episodes I really loved overall. Um, I think part of it is because it was in service to the Lorian story.
hmm
Especially with what ends up happening with Luke Skywalker, and Grogu, where Grogu makes his choice. It even though it was kind of using the old characters, it still was in service of something new. Um, Part of me was a little disappointed that in the last episode it was R2 that piloted the X-wing to drop Grogu off, and that Luke didn't do it himself. But
yeah,
I feel like the showrunners and writers probably purposely sidestepped that because then you have to deal with A, Luke Skywalker returning to Tatooine, his homeworld, and B, possibly a Luke and Boba Fett reunion. And last time they saw each other, things didn't go so well.
yeah. That's a good call on that. Plus, they get their obligatory R2D2 check in off the boxes as well that way. So
Yeah, exactly. I
you,
mean, what did you think about the kind of revisiting of old characters?
yeah, I think the ones we've mentioned so far. How do you? I've mispronounced. Is it? How do you say Ahsoka? Is that how
I
you say
think it's
Ahsoka?
Ahsoka from
Okay, I
what
was
I've
saying
heard.
Asuka. Okay, so I thought her role in the series was fine. I mean, I don't know if it was necessary, but
Yeah, I mean, I think she was 1,000% there just to because she's getting her own series, like that's been announced.
yeah, just to kind of keep her
So yeah, I feel
in
like
the
she was
public
just
consciousness.
just to kind of keep her relevant and possibly set some things up for her series.
Well, and am I correct in this? Did the Mandalorian ever talk directly to Luke
He did not. He only talked to Ahsoka.
through her, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he only saw Luke and Grogu from a distance.
So maybe that's, I mean, in their mind, part of the reason they had it in there. Mando, I was fine with Mando showing up because Boba Fett was in the series season 2 of Mandalorian, so that was kind of the payback pitch for that, I thought, which was fine. Grogu, I mean, that's like a whole nother episode. I mean, what's Is he like the face of the franchise? And Mandalorian and Grogu are basically the face of the franchise now, right?
Kind of seems like it. I mean, I
Which I'm
maybe
fine with.
maybe at the end we can talk about like speculation about where we think other
Yeah.
series in the franchise might go. But
Okay. All right, we'll save that. All right. So the two you didn't mention here, Cobb Vanth, you said you really enjoyed the character here.
love Timothy Oliphant, love Cobb
Mhm.
Vanth. I was really excited to see him show up again. Did not for a second believe that he was actually dead after Cad Bane ostensibly murdered him.
I got a little worried. I got a
I
little worried,
was
I gotta be honest.
I so after that initially happened, I didn't believe he was dead. During the final episode, when the townsfolk said he was dead, I was like,
And then they didn't show him, and you're like,
yeah, I was like, I mean, I still was hesitant to believe it because it didn't seem like they would kill a major character slash actor like that just unceremoniously off screen. But yeah, I mean, I think if have you seen Justified?
so I have not seen
I have not
Justified.
either. I need to though.
I love him in Santa Clarita Diet, and I love him in Deadwood, so I'm sure I'd love him in that
Yeah.
as well.
But I mean, I get the sense that I mean Deadwood too, kind of vibing off the Western lawman thing.
Yeah,
But yeah, I loved him. I think he's a great actor. I thought that character was awesome. I mean, I loved his introduction in The Mandalorian. He's wearing Boba Fett's armor, and
yeah.
I loved how that all went down. I mean,
Not
can we flash forward to the post credit sequence? I mean,
sure,
this
sure,
might
sure,
get
sure.
into like the speculation thing, but that was one of the. I mean, so talking about the final episode as a whole, right after I watched it, I literally told our friend group that 10-year-old me would have literally thought it was the greatest thing he'd ever seen in his life.
The final fight.
The whole episode, like there was a
Yeah,
lot of stuff that was just like a younger version of me would have like lost his mind over it. I mean, adult me still really liked it, and I mean, I've seen a lot of people who like didn't seem to love that episode, which I don't really get. But one of the things I didn't like about it was what happened with Cobb Vanth. They mentioned that he's dead, and then we don't see him at all. And then we get this really kind of weak mid-credit sequence where there's someone in a bacta tank, and if you look closely, you're like, oh, is that Cobb Vanth with like more of a beard, possibly? And then there's the mod doctor guy standing over him, lighting a blowtorch, even while Cobb Vanth is inside the bacta tank for some reason, for dramatic
I
effect.
didn't even catch that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. So I mean, I wish we would have had gotten a little bit more there, but I mean, obviously that's setting something up for the future. But yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
once.
I'm glad to know that he's not dead and that we'll see him again.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I'm glad that he's a character that looks like he's just stick around for a little while. Good actor, good character. I like the sheriff of the western town out in the outskirts of the bigger city kind of trope
Yeah,
that
and
he's playing
actually,
as
I
well, I
mean,
guess.
in general, I mean that is something that I liked about this series is how much they leaned into Western tropes.
Yeah,
I mean, and that's with the series in general, they kind of wore their inspirations on their sleeves. I mean, not just westerns, but I could see a lot of kind of like Scorsese and like gangster movie influences with some of the war between the Pikes and Boba Fett's crew. So I like that they kind of wore their inspirations on their sleeves.
no, I definitely agree with that. One character we haven't mentioned yet is the Cad Bane.
The Cad
What
Bane.
Cad Bane, who has, again, I only know his character peripherally from some of the stuff I have seen out there, but fantastic introduction
He's the
into
man
the
in
universe.
black.
Man, got
He is
that
the
nice.
man. I mean, yeah, talk about classic Western motifs. I
Exactly.
mean, he's the man in black walks into town and ends up having a showdown with the sheriff.
Duel with the sheriff, yeah. Which,
Yeah, I mean, I know that he's a pretty popular character from the sort of expanded universe. Like you,
right.
I was not familiar with him at all before this. I mean, like I knew he existed, but I had never really seen any portrayals. Um, I have to say, when I first saw a close up of him, I was a little concerned about the translation into live action, but it ended up working for me, like more than I thought it would.
Yeah, because he's kind of like this. I don't even know what he is.
He's some sort of alien, I'm pretty sure.
Is he robot? Is he android? Is he hybrid? Is he just a weird species? Like,
I don't really know. And I mean, that's a good question because I I know some people have said that they thought they heard like a ticking sound after he ostensibly got killed.
right? Yeah.
I didn't actually hear that, but I also wasn't listening closely. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he's actually dead. I will say that I'm torn because he's a cool character, but at the same time, I hate when things don't have stakes. So we already have Cobb Vanth, who we thought was dead, and we know that he's, going to be coming back in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
I feel like it'll be kind of frustrating if we have another person who's in the exact same category, and it's like the guy who, ostensibly killed Cobb Vanth in the first place. So I don't know.
Also turns out to not be dead, unlike the poor Gamorrean guards, presumably.
Womp womp. Poor piggies.
Poor piggy.
Well, what did you? I mean, so what did you end up thinking about the finale, the last episode overall?
I mean, I think you probably described it pretty well when you said the 10-year-old self would have really enjoyed it. I mean, I'm also a pro wrestling fan, and to me, this last episode was just like the main event of the wrestling show you're watching, and they're pulling everybody out of the dressing room and
It
throwing them
was
out
a
there.
slobber knocker.
It was a slobber knocker. They're doing their big things, and then all of a sudden, Andre the Rancor comes out of nowhere, which you
Oh
knew
my
that was
god!
coming in. And
Like, if you had told me, like 20, 25 years ago that like all you need to say to me is Boba Fett rides a Rancor. Like what? Where? What? That's like the most amazing thing I've ever heard of. Like so, I mean,
well,
my first let's not be too gross here, but the first thing that gave me a giant nerd boner was dual quote unquote Mandos using their jetpacks at a gunfight. Like when Mando and Boba Fett just come out with their freaking jetpacks firing, guns
yeah.
blazing, like that was the start of the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And then it just kind of carried through from there. Like it was just, I mean, the Rancor thing was insane. Let me this is something that I was going to ask you about, which comes comes to mind when talking about this last episode.
Hit me.
Uh how do you feel about the mods?
All right, so I didn't have a problem with them. Let me start with that. I just think they're kind of this ancillary workforce that he has for him, and they didn't really need to be expanded too much. Um, I don't know. They're not developed at all, but I feel like they could be just kind of his henchmen type creatures in future
How,
seasons if they do this anymore or revisit the place with him there.
how do you feel about their glittery bikes?
Fine. I was fine with the glittery
You
bikes.
fine with them, he says.
That's right. I
My
was fine with
gosh.
them.
I honestly I have a friend who I had basically been like live chatting all of the episodes with, and she seemed to have a big problem with the whole thing. I'm kind of with you. Like I thought it was a little silly, but I didn't have a huge issue with it. I mean, if nothing else, to me, it's just a giant homage to George Lucas and his love of like 50s hot rods and stuff. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's probably where that came from.
I mean,
So
to me, it was just a further extension of, despite having not done much in his first 6 episodes, Boba has assembled like the most motley crew possible
yeah, that's
down on the
fair.
planet. Like he has a Wookiee, he has the mods, he
I
has
do like
the
the
Morian
Wookiee.
guards, the Rancor, he has.
I forget the Wookiee's full name, but
I
I
can't think of either.
believe I believe Boba called him Santo for short.
Okay.
And I
I was,
would like to imagine that's a reference to El Santo, but it's probably not.
I was thinking it was something like close to chrysanthemum or something like that
It
too,
is, yeah, it is something like that.
but I don't
It
know.
starts with a KR and ends with something Santo
Santo.
something.
Santo.
I like him though. I mean, I'm hoping he shows up more after his bath of the Bacta tank.
Yeah, that was character I knew they were going to do something with, and I was pretty happy with what they ended up doing
And
with
I
the
guess I
character.
mean that's again that's kind of my thing overall with the series is I feel like it introduced a lot of cool ideas, but it just didn't spend enough time with any of them.
Yeah,
Also, justice for Jennifer Beals.
Justice for Jennifer Beals. Okay, so I got to ask because sometimes the memory is complete crap. What happened to Danny Trejo?
He just disappeared. As far as I remember, he just disappears. I don't think anything happened to him.
That was just a dead plot that never went anywhere.
I I I'll be honest, I was not paying great attention to the first four episodes.
Danny
Um
Trejo shows up
oh,
with
I know. He shows up. He's the Rancor trainer. I know
the
that.
job is the job was bring the rancor, right? And
Yeah.
Danny Trejo is the person, and then they have like this shot of Danny Trejo being like, "Don't worry, we'll get him eventually," like to the rancor about Boba Fett, and then like he never showed up again, and he knows how to ride the rancor.
Yeah, I think that was just a cameo. I don't think we ever saw or heard anything else about Danny Trejo.
I mean, that's just weird because I feel like it could have just been a cameo, but then don't throw the line in there about like I'm gonna secretly train you to kill Boba Fett, and then
That's fair.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's what loose plot threads in this show. That's crazy.
I mean, we all know Danny Trejo would have beat the Rancor in a fair fight, but that's
That's
yet to be
true,
determined there.
especially if he had his machete.
Also, what if Cobb Vanth had been played by Danny Trejo? That would have just made that town even more badass out there. But anyway,
I like Holy Fantastic.
oh, he was fantastic. I'm just saying. Anyway, or they could have like made Danny Trejo the Wookiee and just like put some patches of hair on his face. And they were like,
uh,
"What?
that would be amazing.
This is my cousin George. He
So I
doesn't
mean,
know
it.
me apparently."
I mean, it sounds. I feel like we actually kind of agree to a large extent about this series.
I think we're pretty close. I want to put you on the spot here. We can either talk about the future or let's give it a ranking out of 10. Which one do you want to do first?
Let's do a rating out of 10.
All right, I got to think for a half second. Okay, I got it.
All right, here's where I'm at. And
Yes,
it's tricky because like I said, if I was rating the first four episodes on their own, it would be like a 3 or 4 out of 10. But
that's fair.
ultimately, if I'm rating the series as a whole, I would probably give it a 7.
Damn it, I also gave it a 7. We agreed in
My
this
God,
episode.
what? What?
What is gonna change the name of the
What
whole
kind of
podcast now?
what kind of podcast about friends arguing about things is this?
Uh,
I
I'm
mean,
also going to give it a 7. I feel like the
ultimately
last
I enjoyed
couple,
it.
yes, it redeemed it with the last few. I didn't hate the first four. They just got a little long in the tooth with the Tuscan Raider backstory, and there weren't
Yeah,
enough
I
dates.
mean, I think there's so much more they could have either done much more or they could have condensed it down. Like they needed to go one way or the other with those first four.
Yeah,
But
which
yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
would it have been a bad thing if it had been a six episode season? I don't know. Probably would have been a little tighter.
yeah, I think that might have been better. Honestly, I was surprised when I saw there was 7. Like it seems like it'd be either 6 or 8. Um, but yeah, wow, I'm kind of surprised that we agreed like straight on like that.
That's amazing.
We can argue more. Listen, when we get to that last Jedi episode, there'll be plenty of arguing.
That's right. I can explain to you why Rogue One is the better movie.
Oh boy, let's not even talk about that right now. You get a 0 out of 10.
You can't count to 10. All right. Anyway.
Well, so what do we I mean, so what comes now is the question. I mean,
Right.
on the one hand, I was glad that they didn't drag out Grogu's decision because I don't need that as a cliffhanger. But on the other hand, the whole point of the Mandalorian up until the end of the second season was that he's going to reunite Grogu with quote unquote his people, the Jedi.
Right. Right.
He does that, and now after 2 episodes with Luke Skywalker, Grogu's like, "Fuck you, Jedi! I'm going back to hang out with my space dad."
Grogu was only using him as a babysitter this whole time.
I mean, it's just it's weird and hard to think about because I don't think that we're done with seeing like Grogu interacting with Jedi, but I don't know what that looks like going forward. Like
Right.
I
So this all takes place after episode 6, and by episode 7, which is I don't know how many years later. Do you know the answer on that? Between 6 and 7.
I think it's supposed to be like almost real time. I think it's supposed to be like 30 some years.
Okay. So, and by that point, that's when Luke's already had the school and it's all gone to crap and everything else, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, but Grogu is obviously
I mean, we
just
can probably
Yoda.
assume that Luke's school is what those androids are building.
Yeah.
So he's working on it. And I mean, this is like something I heard mentioned on another podcast is that in the sequel trilogy, they say that Ben was like Luke's first student. So
Oh,
Grogu apparently was not actually technically Luke's first student, probably
Ben
because he
Solo.
leaves.
Okay. I thought you meant
Ben
Ben
Solo.
Kenobi. I was like,
No,
wait,
Ben
what?
Solo. Ben
Okay.
Swolo, am I right?
He's the worst actor ever, possibly.
But anyway, like I feel like I have no idea what happens with regard. I mean, we know Ahsoka gets her own series. The next thing is the Obi-Wan series, which I don't think that's going to tie into this at all.
Yeah, that's an
But
earlier timeline, but I've seen people criticize that it's going to be on a desert planet.
yeah, but I just have no
Hell,
idea
which
what
is
happens
fair.
with Grogu and Mando.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean,
Oh, you're breaking up.
they had like the. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I know they had talked about the Ranger show, and there was that the Cara Dune show, and then that all happened.
Yeah, I've heard speculation that the Rangers show is getting canceled. I guess there hasn't been any mention of it in a suspiciously long time.
Okay, I did hear one rumor that they might replace her character with Cobb Vanth's character somehow for that show, like
Well,
retool
so
it for
that's
him to
something I
be
wanted to talk about as far as speculation is what do we think is going to happen with Cobb Vanth?
I mean, it's tough because he's on this planet supposedly protecting these people out in his town, and that's basically where Boba Fett's operation is going to be from now on, and presumably not where Grogu and the Mandalorian are going to end up long term, in my opinion, at least. They're going to go on more galactic adventures, yada yada.
It seems
So I
like
don't
it.
know. I don't know. It seems like he's like
I
stuck in a.
saw I saw one thing which I don't agree with necessarily, but some people are speculating that he's like possibly because of the modifications that the mod doctor dude is going to do that he's going to end up becoming a villain,
Oh,
which would be interesting, but I mean unless the guy does something to his brain, like I don't think he's going to suddenly turn evil.
hmm.
The other speculation I heard is at the end of the finale, Boba and Fennec Shand are they have that exchange where Boba says, we're not cut out for this when people are like handing them gifts and everything. And
Oh,
this seems more likely to me. Some of the speculation I heard is that Boba might basically hand the reins over to Cobb Vanth and let him just run things on Tatooine from now on. And then Boba and Fennec Shand can go off and maybe rejoin the Mandalorian, but
have
otherwise
their
have
own
their own
adventures.
adventures out there.
It's a little sub note, but that was one of my disappointments from the last episode. Is I did not enjoy that Fennec Shand was seemingly running across the city to the Pikes headquarters for like 53 minutes.
That's fair.
I was like,
Which
all of
actually
these
let's
characters are getting their comeuppance here to kick ass in these big scenes, and then she's like, "I'm gonna head over there," and then you see her in the last like minute hang a guy. And you're like, "Oh, okay,
it's because she had to take a little detour to save the mods.
sure, sure, sure."
I mean, I think I mentioned before that I like that she hanged the mayor. Like that seemed really dark for Star Wars.
Yeah, that was some blood on the Captain America shield type stuff right there.
Yeah, she like just I mean, obviously she's like an anti-hero if anything, but still it's that and Boba Fett ostensibly just straight up murdering Cad Bane. Pretty dark.
I mean, he was getting his ass kicked before that, but yeah, he does essentially. I mean, which is what we're saying here was kind of the part of him we wanted to see the whole series
Yeah,
show.
well, I was gonna say, I mean, that kind of brings that back, and I mean,
Maybe that lights the fire.
maybe that's where this talk about we're not cut out for this comes from. Maybe this ends up, maybe he realizes that he's not meant to just be a good guy watching out for people. I don't think he's going to turn full villain, but if anything, I mean, I could see him going back, him and Fennec being bounty hunters together.
Maybe they'll take their crew with them, and this will be like Guardians of the Galaxy Star Wars universe.
I would watch that.
I would too, probably. I would watch all of them, probably, though.
It is weird because I feel like at this point, I mean, you had said before, like, is Grogu and Mando the face of the franchise now? I think they are. Like, I feel like it feels like the future of Star Wars is kind of on their shoulders. There haven't been any movies announced. I mean, the only one that was announced was Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron movie, which I could be wrong, but I think that might have been canceled, or if nothing else, we haven't heard anything about it in a while. Ryan Johnson is supposedly still working on his own trilogy, but I am not entirely convinced that's actually happening still. So, and I mean, it seems like all of these series are going to at least tie into Mandalorian, with the exception probably of Obi-Wan.
Yeah, he'll just be the thread that kind of connects the whole universe together, I guess, at that point.
I'm so curious to see where this goes.
And they're going to try the TV show route, and they're going to try to spit out 4 or 5 of these different things, I think. Andor, that's another one's coming out, right?
Yeah, I always forget about that because I have absolutely zero interest in that.
Because that has the guy from what?
Rogue One.
Rogue One, yeah, Rogue One. So,
My favorite movie.
which again is presumably the wrong timeline here. So,
yeah, because that's between. Is that before A New Hope, or is that between A New Hope and Empire?
well, it ends with them getting the Death Star plan. So that's what, 4?
Is that the original Death Star?
So whatever one Leia stashed in
Many Bothans died to get these plans. Yeah, oh yeah, it would have been. I forgot that. I forgot Rogue One. The end of Rogue One literally leads up to the beginning of Episode 4.
First couple of minutes, yeah, of the other one.
I will say that the Darth Vader scene in Rogue One was awesome. That was the only part of that movie I liked because that felt like the first time we really saw like the full extent of Darth Vader's power.
That's fair.
Like him just absolutely annihilating a hallway full of people.
We'll have to do a deep dive into Rogue One.
Anyway, any final thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett? I almost said the Mandalorian because that's what this really is.
Yeah. No, I think we hit pretty close here to the same points, I think, on the way through, and it ramped up.
Do you think we will? Final question.
Okay.
Do you think we'll see a Book of Boba Fett season 2, or do you think it'll just be wrapped into the Mandalorian going forward? Would you want to see another season?
That is very hard because I feel like if we interpret his final comments, as you said, as he might be doing new endeavors, then sure, I'd be for more episodes and more seasons of him going on adventures with Fennec and doing whatever. If he's going to stay here on the planet and keep doing what he did in this season, they'd have to improve it somehow. Make it more interesting on the day-to-day level. But they have a cool crew. Like, we kind of talked, they've established characters that I'd be invested in if they did something with them.
That's fair. Well, I guess we'll see.
We will see.
Only time will tell what will happen a long time ago in that galaxy far, far away.
2 days ago, 3 months from now. All right. Yes. Very good.
I think that might bring us to the end of the first episode of Fonda.
Friends occasionally
not disagreeing. This is one of those occasions, as it turns out.
I can't believe it.
I am just as shocked as you are. But hey, I'm sure there will be some arguments in the future.
Oh, I'm sure there will be. So,
All right. Cody,
all right, Jojo.
good talking. We'll see
Sounds
you
good.
next time.
Take care.